To 9.7, Rick, you asked that this item be pulled for discussion?
Yeah, it is kind of stated in our packet that we were told by Union Pacific Railroad that they were going to be doing some repair work at the two locations in town, and both locations require a great deal of shutdown. They would require pavement after the rails were repaired. My question is that this is hidden away in our packet, and if we vote on it without some kind of explanation, that's what I'm looking for, so that we can explain to the public what has happened here, how it's proceeding, and there's a $90,000 expenditure, as I understand it, right? Oh. Maybe I thought I'm getting my 90s mixed up. No,
that was
it's a
the other-
$10,000.
Last item.
The estimated is between 25 and 30.
Right. So I just think it's important that we explain to the public why this has happened, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and also why we're not bidding this in a considered emergency item.
I'll let
Mr.
the
Mayor,
city
members of-
engineer respond to that.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item was not put on the consent calendar to try to slip it by anybody.
No,
My apologies if there is any perception that staff was doing so. That was not the intent. This is a pretty straightforward piece of business. Actually, for many people who don't know or aren't aware, that the railroad was in its current location before the city was in its current location. The railroad owns that right-of-way. The city actually has an easement across the railroad's property for our roads. The county likewise has easements across the railroad's properties for their roads. The county, the city, the state for SR 113, we all have agreements with the UP Railroad that allow us to have that access to that roadway, that easement. And within that agreement, and the city of Dixon's was signed in 1940, within that agreement, there's language that says the railroad has the right to come in and repair their tracks at any time they choose to do so, according to their whims of their business operation. And when they do that, the city, and likewise the county and the state, are bound to do the pavement conforms. So the railroad comes in and they actually repair the rails and the wooden ties that are underneath the railroad and the rock, ballast rock. But any pavement leading up to or across those tracks has to be repaired by the government agency that has the easement. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts, there's no argument, there's no discussion, that's just the way the agreement reads. We were informed very recently, about 10 days ago, by the railroad that they are coming into Solano County and they are going to repair their tracks and their railroad crossings, all of the railroad crossings throughout Solano County. And they're going to start at each end. So one end is at Suisun and the other end is up here in Dixon near Davis, and they're going to work towards the middle. And they gave us a list of dates of the crossings in the vicinity of downtown Dixon. And actually, we've put out a press release. It'll probably be in tomorrow's paper because it went out late last week. But they've given us the dates and said, be there and be ready to pave and have your traffic control in place. So again, it's a fairly straightforward piece of business because of this old agreement. Because of the time frame, it usually takes us about a month to a month and a half to put out for public bid, to get bids, to get the bids in from the contractors, evaluate the bids, make sure that the contractor is who they say they are and can do what they say they can do, and then bring that to council, get it on an agenda, bring it to council, get approval by council, and then execute a contract. And that contract takes multiple signatures, the city manager, the city attorney, the representative from the contracting agency. So I'm boring everybody, but what this means is it's about 6 to 8 weeks for us to get a contract in place. We don't have 6 to 8 weeks. If we don't have a contractor out there, what happens is the railroad tears up their railroad tracks and they shut down our street. And it stays shut down until we fix it. So we're in what I refer to as this is an emergency situation. We can't afford to have a street shut down for days or weeks on end. That's really our main east-west thoroughfare in town. So what we've done is we've requested from council for permission to go out with a purchase order. We've already contacted some contractors and we've got some bids in hand. We're looking at about $25,000. That's for the for the traffic control and all the paving. And that's why we've come to council tonight, asking to do this in this manner, asking for council to declare this pretty much an emergency situation, waive our normal formal bid procedures, and allow the city manager to execute a purchase order with the contractor, the low bid contractor. Hopefully that answers any questions that you have.
I have another question for you. Royce, I understand the project, and I also understand that on A Street, the pedestrian area there is pretty much impassable because of the way the asphalt is and everything else. Are we going to correct that so that it's more or less ADA compliant, and a person in a chair can get across that easily?
Unfortunately, the railroad will not allow us to do that. The railroad does not want pedestrians crossing at either A Street or First Street. They want the pedestrians to use the B Street pedestrian crossing. So they will not allow us to make modifications within their property. Even though we have an easement, they won't let us make pedestrian sidewalk, let's say, modifications that will allow that. Any ADA, people with ADA issues, they will have to go to the B Street pedestrian crossing.
Is there any way to alter that area, like putting a half circle on the end so that it makes it impossible for people to use it? I don't understand why we have sidewalks there if they're not usable. I mean, I understand on the other side where people get off at the post office and walk on in or whatever and down there, but to me, having a sidewalk that is inducing people to use it, and then they see that there's sidewalk on the other side, and I understand the thing with the UP saying what they're saying, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think you raised an interesting and a valid point. The sidewalk's been there for many, many years, and I'm assuming, and not being a Dixon resident for many years, but I'm assuming many years ago, pedestrians, well, they still do once in a while, they cross at A Street. And at one point in time, I'm sure somebody with a wheelchair at some point in time has taken the wherewithal and crossed at that location. It's not desired, it's not what the railroad wants, it's not what the city wants, but the sidewalks were there. We're in a little more modern time now. We're much more aware of ADA issues. I think your point is well worth us looking at. Obviously, what we want to do is when we build the B Street pedestrian undercrossing project, we do want to direct all pedestrian traffic to that location. Perhaps we could do some signage. We can definitely look at some things that we might be able to do to steer people, pedestrians, as well as ADA, people in wheelchairs, away from the crossing at A Street and head them towards the B Street crossing.
Well, the reason I ask is I don't know whether that's part of the safe path to school going down A Street, but I have seen students walking through there, just continuing on down A Street from the old high school area, or now I guess from the new high school area. Saw some today. And to me, unless we put up some sort of barrier there, we're still going to have, and kids will walk around it anyway. If that's the shortest way, they're going to do that. They're not going to hook up to B and then back on over to A. And
Well, that's correct. The safe route to school route is indeed the B Street pedestrian crossing. And like you, I see kids cross at A Street, at First Street. I've seen kids cross the tracks where there aren't any crossings. And like you said earlier, you can't, a government can't stop everybody from doing something. If we tried to put up fences, in all likelihood, my fear would be if we put up a fence, what we would do is we would actually steer the pedestrians into the street to get around the fence and potentially make an accident happen inadvertently. So ultimately, when the B Street pedestrian undercrossing project does go in, there will be fencing in the area to try to steer pedestrians to the B Street crossing. The railroad refuses to fence their right-of-way. They would love it if we would fence their entire right-of-way, but obviously the cost is prohibitive.
well, thank you, Royce, but I think we're already directing people out into the street because they can't walk on that busted up area of asphalt that's over there. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've talked about 9.7, 9.6. I'll now entertain, assuming that nobody wishes any further questions of those items,